Good day to all of you. Let's continue with the essay of Travel by Francis Bacon. Yesterday, I had elaborated on how Bacon had insisted on maintaining a diary to record the observations about the places that a person visits. And he had also talked about the different kind of places that one visits during the course of his or her journey. For example, if the place that one visits is a country that is ruled by a king or a queen, then a person gets the chance to visit those palaces and the royal courts and observe the splendor and the opulence of those places. And one also gets to visit the different places that one can see during the course of the journey, like churches or monasteries. And these or such places, they have their own architectural designs and styles, and they are a kind of a visual treat. Also, one gets to know about the history of the place by visiting fortresses and the ruins, which are a witness of the past, and one gets to learn a lot about the history. Besides, one also gets to know and observe the great centers of learning, like the famous universities and the public buildings, the recreational places, the operas. Also, sometimes one visits a new place to participate in social occasions like a marriage or a funeral or some such victory celebration. And there are so many things that one sees and observes and learns. And when one is kind of delighting and marveling at the beauty and the uniqueness of a place, Bacon is of the opinion that all these observations should be recorded and documented. So let's move on now with the essay. I quote: "If you will have a young man to put his travel into a little room, and in short time to gather much, this you must do. First, as was said, he must have some entrance into the language before he goeth." Unquote. Now, here in this passage, Bacon enumerates and talks about some of the do's and the don'ts before undertaking a travel expedition. And he says that these do's and don'ts are a must so that one can benefit as much as he can and add value to his travel. So the first thing that he says is that a person who's traveling to a new place must have some basic knowledge of the language of that place before he sets out on his or her journey. Then he says, I quote again, "Then he must have such a servant or tutor as knoweth the country, as was likewise said, let him carry with him also some card or book describing the country where he travelleth, which will be a good key to his inquiry. Then he goes on to say that besides having some basic knowledge about the language, it is also important to have a knowledgeable guide to accompany such a person undertaking a journey. And this guide must be very well conversant with the country that he is visiting. And one should also carry with him some books or some catalogs or some brochures about the places that the person is traveling, because these prove to be very handy in the course of travel, because these brochures and catalogs, they tell you a lot about the place and about the traditions and about the regulations, the rules that one must adhere to. So besides having a little bit first hand knowledge about the language, one must also uh, be accompanied by a guide who will help him along with books and brochures. Then he goes on to say that, I quote, let him keep also a diary. And as mentioned earlier, Bacon says that along with all this information, one must also carry a diary. He repeats that. I quote again, let him not stay long in one city or town, more or less as the place deserveth, but not long. Nay, when he stayeth in one city or town, let him change his lodging from one end and part of the town to another, which is a great adamant of acquaintance. Now, what he is saying over here in this passage is that that when one travels to the new place, besides having all of the above what I just said, brochures, the catalogs, the a guide and a diary, he says that this person, this traveler, should not stay more than it is necessary to stay in that one place. And he advises that if he does stay in a city or a town for a longer duration, then he must keep changing his lodging and move to another end of that town or city, so that he gets maximum exposure of that place. Because the intent and purpose of visiting a new place is to know as much as one can. And just staying in one part of the city, a person would not be able to know everything about that place. So if the duration of stay is long, one should keep changing their lodging to get maximum benefit from that place. And another thing that he says is that when one is staying in that place, he must not choose to stay among people from his own place. Because generally, what happens is when you go to a new place, you start looking for acquaintances or people whom you are familiar with or whom you know. But Bacon advises and says that the best way to know a to know a new place is to choose to live among people of that host country, so that he gets to know about the place, about the people, about their habits through